Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from August 23rd, 2024, and I'm recording this on February 20th, 2025. As always, those dates are so you know when this information is actually relevant because the market is always moving and changing. Also, as always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. Yeah, I know I do this every week on the same intro, but I think it's important for anybody that comes in new to know what lists we're looking at and what the time frame is. But yeah, we use those two lists to determine what was kind of hot moving in the market, what was jumping in value, what books were people chasing that were getting a big spike in sales. And then we come back now, 6 months later, and see how those books are doing now. Should you have been patient? Should you have went after them? What were the factors that made them hot then, and how are those factors still affecting the book, or what other factors have happened since? So the goal here, as always, is just to help us understand how the market moves, maybe make a little better decisions about what books we invest in the moment versus that we're patient on. As always, as I was reminded recently, there's no wrong way to collect, but we can all maybe be just a little touch smarter as we grab the stuff we really want. So with that up, we got 17 books to talk about. Let's dig into this list and see what we can learn this week. First up, we have Crossed, number 0 on the list. Second, third time at this point. It's been on the list multiple times because there are rumors that it got optioned, that there's going to be a movie. Raw copies back then were going for $60. A 9.4 of this book hit $215. Now it's a $20 to $40 book. 9.8 going for $150. Yeah, this is a trap. No reason to chase this book. I still find it a little hard to believe this book is going to be made. It is very over-the-top violent, even for Garth Ennis. But we will see. There are still people speculating on this. I believe it actually hit the list not that long ago, since the 6 month ago time. But as of right now, it is definitely down in trap for when it was hitting the list 6 months ago. Next, we have Something Is Killing the Children. Number 1, the A cover on the list for the second week in a row because Tinian had talked about the Netflix show. I believe he shared some information about like scripts being worked on, that kind of stuff. 315 to 550 back then. 9.8s were up 800 to 1,000. Still down from some of the peaks for this book, but $800 to $1,000 back 6 months ago. Now it's a $200 to $500 book raw, so just a slight shift downward on the raw side. 9.8s have actually moved lower than that. It's now a $600 to $800 book for a 9.8, which is interesting. When it was on the list last week, we were talking about it being a $600 book, getting it on the list, which is sales and stuff. So it's a down and I'll be back, but it's still, within realm of where it's kind of just sat. I mean, this book has been pretty consistently in this current range. Had that little kick up 6 months ago, but in this current range for a year plus. It's been pretty much right in here. Next, we have Something Is Killing the Children. Number 1, the Frizen FOC variant. This variant of the book is one of the more popular of the variants, but it's also one of the more affordable variants for the number 1, just because there was a bunch of, this wasn't limited in terms of its output. People love this cover, so it in some ways got slabbed more, I think, than even the A cover did. Doesn't carry that A cover value, but still $75 to $130 for raw copy, $170 to $200 for 9.8 back then when it was hitting the list. Now it's a $40 to $125 for raw copy, 9.8, $165 to $250, although there was a recent $99 auction. So overall, we're going to call this steady, and I'll be back. That 99 would indicate down, but sometimes you can get steals on auctions. It just, if things go under the radar, sometimes you can. So the buy it now price is still that $165, $250 on 9.8. So still doing pretty well for this particular book. Next, we got more movie news, but this was related to a movie getting released, and that is Aliens number 1. The newest Aliens movie came out this time last fall or last summer. 60 to 140 back then, 9.8, 24.50. 9.8s on this book are very hard to get. There's not a lot of them. They go for an absolute premium, as you can get 9.6s well under $1,000, but 9.8s, 24.50 on this one back then. Now it's a $30 to $130 book, so another mostly within the same range, maybe a slight step back on the low end. 9.8's $21.25 for the most recent 9.8 sale. So yeah, we're going to call this steady, and I'll be back. Definitely a few bargains out there. You can do a little better. You can do a little better on that 9.8, but still a book that is 9.8, and especially 9.8 goes for a premium, and still a very popular book. Next, we have Iron Man 282, the first appearance of the War Machine first appearance of the War Machine armor, and this was in the list because the armor came to Fortnite. So that is why people were going after it. Raw copies were going for 100, 9.8, 225. Now raw copies 30 to 100, with more of the sales in the 40, 50, 30 to 60 range and up toward 100. 9.8, 175 to 200. So down, and I'll be back on this particular book. Yeah, a reminder that Tony is actually in the armor in this the first time we get the War Machine armor, not Rhodey, but that switch comes not too much later. Next, we have the Unbelievable Gwenpool, number 1. This was on the list last week, or at least a Gwenpool book was on the list last week because the skin was added to Fortnite. Back then, $20 for this, her first mini-series. Now, 10 to 20, 9.8, 50. Down, and I'll be back. No reason to have changed this because of the Fortnite skin. All right, with that, we got one more kind of random reason for a book to be on the list, and that is a book on the list because of toys, and this is Batman number 1 from 2011, the start of the new 52 run for Batman, the start of the second series, the first Lincoln March appearance, and that was hitting the list because we were getting Court of Owls figures from McFarlane Toys, so that was why this was hitting the list. $30, 9.8, 130. Now it's a $30 to $50 book, 9.8, 1 to 200. So this is actually up and worth it. This is an interesting book. It was pretty valuable when I first got back into collecting still in 2017, 2018. It had dropped quite a bit compared to what it was. This bounce back is more, the fact that it's kind of bounced back since it's brought it back into news is really more in line of where the book had been longer term. So interesting to see this book doing well at this point. Next, we have Transformers number 11, the 1 per store James Herron variant, the Ultra Mega variant. And yeah, this was on the list for the second week in a row. At this point, it was an $80 to $100 book, which is actually the exact same as last week. Still just lots of sales, hadn't moved in value, but lots of sales going here. Now it's a $55 to $100 book, 9.8, 115 and 135. So not a big jump to the 9.8s versus just buying a raw copy. But most of the raw copies are still around that $80-ish mark. So we're going to call it steady. I'll be back. It's most of the copies are 70 to 90, with occasionally going up to 100, occasionally going down to 50. So it's sitting just below where it was before. So that's, or within the range to slightly below where it was before. So we'll call it a steady, and then I'll be back. All right, next we continue with our covers. We have Wolverine Revenge number 1. The Linnell Francis Yu Red Band 1 in 25. This was hitting the list back then at $50 to $70. So between double and triple ratio, not a great sign. Usually means it's going to end up around ratio. And it is now a $10 to $30 book with actually more sales below the 25 ratio than above it. Although there was also a recent $50 sale thrown in there for raw copy, which is definitely an outlier compared to the number of sales that are, because there are a bunch of sales for this book, and that's definitely an outlier. None of the others go above 30. 9.8, $100. Yeah, this is down in a dumpster fire. No reason to chase this book when it first came out at $50 to $70. Next, we have Blood Hunt number 5, the Kale Nguyen 1 in 25, showing off Doom as the new Sorcerer Supreme. That's what happens in this book. Generally speaking, I'm not big on this, like taking on a new title kind of thing. Like first Loki as Sorcerer Supreme doesn't go for that much, but this one back then was going for $60 on this 1 in 25. Also not a great sign, but you thought maybe this had a chance because we are getting this current One World Under Doom book, which is he's taking advantage of being Sorcerer Supreme to actually rule the world. But not the case here. It's an $18 to $30 book. It followed the 1 in 25 rules. No reason to have chased it in the moment. Next, we have our last cover this week is X-Men number 2 from 2024, the J. Scott Campbell 1 in 100 of Magic, and this one does have a trade dress version, so it's not just there are other versions of this cover, which is usually not a great sign, but this 1 in 100 was only going for 100 to 150, so ratio to slightly above, which is also not a great sign for a book holding very well. This one actually held better than you would think, given those descriptions that I've already talked about. It's now a $50 to $100 book. 9.8, 115 to 165. It's still a trap because more of the sales are closer to 50 than closer to the 100. But yeah, it's still, all things considered, not doing that bad considering where it was at and the fact that there's a trade dress version. All right, with that, we're going to move into a little bit of comic buzz. And yeah, we have Deadpool number 31, first appearance of Ellie Camacho, Deadpool's daughter. And she was supposed to become Deadpool in issue 7 of the current run back then. I do not know. I have not been reading any recent Deadpool stuff. I don't know how this played out. I believe he's already back. But I could be wrong on that. You can tell me in the comments below where I've missed the boat on this if I have. But anyway, back then her first appearance was going for 15, 9.8 going for 175. Now it's a $5 to $20 book, but most of the sales are 10 to 20, so it fits within that average of 15 from before. There was a 9.8 sale for 229, but it's the only recent sale, and it was an auction, or no, it was buy now, sorry, but just the one sale, so you can't judge a lot about that, but it was up a little bit. Overall, we're going to just call it steady and I'll be back, because like I said, other than the one sale, all the sales are raw, and they're kind of in that I'll be back range, although they still go into the same area we did before. Next, we have Batman 655, first cameo of Damian Wayne, or first appearance, depending on, I think there's some debate here which this should actually be called. But supposedly there was a new Black Label series coming focused on Damian, which is why this was hitting the list. Raw copies were 50 and 9.8 was 135. And I thought, oh man, this book is really actually pretty darn cheap. Now it's a $20 to $45 book, 9.8, 125 to 250. So the 9.8s have actually taken a slight step ahead. The raw copies have taken a slight step back in the last 6 months. Overall, we'll just call this steady. Steady and I'll be back. Still, the first Damian Wayne is actually kind of pretty cheap. So, next we have Power Pack number 1, the first appearance of the Power Pack. Yes, Power Pack was hitting the list. Apparently, there's rumors of a Disney Plus animated show coming for kids focused on Power Pack, which is why this was hitting the list. Raw copies $15 back then, 9.8, 205. Now it's a $5 to $25 book, 9.8, 2 to 225. So right on the same range. No reason to necessarily have chased it, but definitely steady. I'll be back or worth it, depending on how you want to split hairs here. But yeah, this book sitting right in the same price range it was 6 months ago. But a lot less copies selling, so you might actually still be able to get a deal. Next, we have New Mutants number 1. First of the New Mutants series. I believe all these characters had already appeared. I don't know that there's technically a first appearance in this book. But yeah, what the spec here was that New Mutants were coming to X-Men 97 in either this next season or after. So people were kind of jumping on New Mutants a little bit. $15 for a raw copy, 9.8, 135. Now it's a $5 to $25 book raw, 90 to 200 for 9.8, although more of the sales are in the 90 to 125 range than toward 200. But yeah, New Mutants is kind of, you could argue definitely steady and worth it versus the steady and I'll be back I put here, but more of the raw sales were below 15 than above, so that's why I did it that way. And there was definitely way more raw sales than 9.8 sales. All right, almost to the end here. 2 more books. First up, Marvel Superhero Secret Wars number 8, the origin of the black suit. And basically, this was hitting the list because there are rumors Tom Holland was going to don the black suit in the new Spider-Man 4 movie. We will see, given how mixed up things are with them and Sony kind of finally backing off making at least some of the villain movies. So it'll be interesting to see, since they made all those Venom movies, if Tom truly wears the black suit or if it's truly Venom. But we will see what happens here. $100 to $200 back then, 9.8, 500. Now it's a $75 to $200 book, 9.8, 4 to 500 on that. So yeah, another steady and I'll be back. We've had a bunch of those here in a row toward the end of this list, and we actually got another steady book coming up. But yeah, most of these are, a legit key. It didn't really jump beyond the realm of where it kind of sat. Maybe a slight bump up, and it's kind of just stepped back to where this book normally sits. And that is why we got another steady and I'll be back, which has been the case for several of these books. And then last, and not least this week, we had Amazing Spider-Man number 194, First Prince Black Cat. And this is all about the Sydney Sweeney rumors. This is going to be in Spider-Man 4. This is going to be Black Cat. that Felicia is going to be the love interest. I think we've got more rumors that it is going to be Felicia for this movie, but I don't know that we've ever got any more solidified on who the casting is going to be for Felicia. But raw copies back then, 70 to 200, 9.6 sitting around 800, 9.8 sitting around 2,000. Now it's a $60 to $500 book raw. Really, because there's a couple of really nice copies that sold recently. 9.6 though, 8 to 950, so a slight step up, although still in the same range, pretty much. 9.8, 2,000, right what it was before. So we'll call it steady worth it. A little bit of money could have been gained on some of these purchases, depending on when the timing and how well you did in terms of your purchase. But another great book. And yeah, another week was actually pretty steady. We had more steady books this week than down. That's 2 weeks in a row. Be interesting if that's a shift in the market, or if the market's starting to finally shift and bounce back a little bit for some of these books that are, actual true keys that maybe had gotten depressed too much by the market being down, or if it's just these two lists were a little better than typical, or performed a little better than typical on our 6-month look back. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time. Later.